Hello, everyone, and welcome to Daily God Gems with Lisa Renee. The book of Daniel holds many timeless lessons about how to live out our lives with uncompromising faith and obedience to God. Daniel was a teenager when he and his fellow Israelites entered into captivity in Babylon. King Nebuchadnezzar ordered that young men from the captives be brought into his service, and the chosen had to be either from a royal family or from a family of nobility. And they also had to be without defect, be handsome, and smart. And Daniel was one of those young men. This group was trained in the language and literature of the Babylonians for 3 years. And the first lesson we obtain from Daniel comes during his time in training. In chapter 1, he was resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, as it was used in pagan rituals and most likely were unclean meats. When Daniel approached the chief official, he didn't make rude, stubborn, loud declarations of resistance. Instead, he asked the chief official for permission. Even though God had caused the chief official to show favor and compassion towards Daniel, his approach needed to be consistent with that favor that he received. Daniel received respect, so he needed to return the respect. The lesson we can derive from this is to act out our faith with self-control and respect towards others in all situations, even if the other party might be angry or rude towards us. When we respond with respect and gentleness, it will oftentimes soften the other person's attitude. As we read in Proverbs 15, verse 1, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. We again see Daniel's sensitivity in dealing with others when King Nebuchadnezzar was furious that no one could describe or interpret his dream. We read in chapter 2, verses 14 through 16, when Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. He asked the king's officer, "Why did the king issue such a harsh decree?" Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. At this, Daniel went in to the king and asked for time, so that he might interpret the dream for him. Daniel had to have continued in his tactfulness when he approached the angry king, since he was granted the time he requested. So in addition to being self-controlled and respectful, we need to speak with sensitivity towards those with differing views or even difficult attitudes, and ask God for wisdom in choosing our words. The next lesson from Daniel occurs in the same event. Before Daniel began to interpret the dream, he told King Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 2, verses 27 through 28, "No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries." Daniel gave all credit to God for interpreting the king's dream, and his aim was to glorify God, not himself. And because he did so, the king glorified and honored God for the interpretation. The lesson here is to give God all the glory and to share our testimonies of his love, mercy, and faithfulness in our lives. And when we do, it will plant a seed of faith in others. And even if we don't see it grow into fruition, the seed is there for God to develop it in his own perfect timing. The next lesson comes from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold and commanded all people to fall down and worship it, otherwise they would be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. Daniel's friends refused and declared their faith in God, as we read in chapter 3, verses 17 through 18. "If we were thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Well, God did save them, and the king was astonished, and he yet again gave glory to God. He even declared a new decree that no people of any nation should ever say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This courageous example teaches us to not compromise our faith or bend to the social pressures around us. As we read in Joshua 24, verse 15, "As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." And when we hold our ground and serve the Lord in all we do, we will have a ripple effect on others. It can change hearts, embolden the courage of others, and even save lives. Another lesson from Daniel occurs in chapter 6. When Daniel would have been in his 80s, at this time, King Darius appointed Daniel as one of the 3 administrators over 120 governors. The king was so impressed with Daniel that he planned to set him over the entire kingdom. Well, as you can imagine, the other administrators and the governors did not like this idea. So they convinced the king to issue an edict that anyone who prays to any god or man besides the king for the next 30 days would be thrown into the lion's den. And the king had no idea of the evil plot that they had against this beloved Daniel. So as soon as Daniel learned about this decree, he didn't hide that he would only kneel before God. He immediately went home and prayed in front of the window facing Jerusalem, as he always had done. In the face of persecution, he stood his ground, and he was thrown into the lion's den. Again, God preserved Daniel's life, and King Darius issued a decree that all people in his kingdom must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. This final lesson from Daniel is to stand our ground even in the face of persecution. In every trial we face, God uses it for good. If we keep persevering, God will turn it around and use it for a blessing in our lives, or even in the lives of others. And even if we don't see the blessing right away, we can have confidence in God that one day we will understand. As Romans 8:28 tells us, we know that all things work together for the good to those who love God. In summary, Daniel and his friends were willing to die for their faith in obedience to God. They took their stand and were unshakable. They had courage in the face of fear because they trusted God. Daniel and his friends are even mentioned in Hebrews 11, verses 32 to 34, in the chapter about faith, where we read, "Who through faith shut the mouths of lions and quenched the power of fire." Because Daniel and his friends trusted God and stood their ground, they were true testimonies of God and his glory. King Nebuchadnezzar, King Darius, and King Cyrus all came to also believe in God's greatness and to glorify him. God uses what comes against us for good. He used Daniel as a blessing for his people, plus the millions who have read these events in the Bible since those days. Let's finish with Hebrews 12, verses 1 through 3. "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart." So let's not grow weary or lose heart. Keep faith in God and all that he does for us. And God bless you. Have a wonderful day.